Hey, what's going on, guys? It looks like I got into some major trouble. I'm talking legal troubles. But the problem is, I do not know what lawyer I should pick to represent me. Well, luckily, I have these 37 candidates who may or may not be able to step up to the plate. Yes, today I am ranking all Terraria NPCs, excluding the pets, on how well they could defend me in the courtroom. Now, today's criteria is going to be this: looks, intelligence, judgment, creativity, communication, empathy, and of course, cost. Now, as always, let's hop right in and see who is a Saul Goodman and who is a, look at this dude, I'm going straight to jail. Kicking things off, we're going to go in chronological order, so we're going to start off with the pre-hard mode NPCs. We're going to have the legend himself, the Guide. So, the Guide is just an endless well of knowledge. He's capable of spitting out complete and total facts about what to do or where to go. Now, he would be able to completely advise me and be able to find any and all pieces of information with the law to help me get, at worst, the minimum sentence, and at best, be declared not guilty. We even portray him with his voodoo doll to fight the wall of flesh. He keeps getting reincarnated time and time again. And yet, he just reincarnates and he forgets about the entire past. He still loves us. He still provides us information. He's loyal. He is intelligent, courteous, goal-oriented, and of course, kind. Now, I feel like the Guide is also too kind-hearted to even charge me some sort of great big fee. I think he has every metric we need to go into the highest recognition of S tier. Moving on, we have the Merchant, where the Merchant is like a greedy old man that only spawns once the player has a certain amount of money, and he always says stuff like, "Did you say gold? I'll take that off of you." He's definitely lawyer material, let's be real. He also dislikes the tax collector for obvious reasons, so he definitely has some ways to get out of crimes, such as money laundering or theft. Of course, his cost, if I were to hire him as my lawyer, would be astronomical, and I feel like I'd pay him too much for him to do too little. He would get me the first deal he can reach with the prosecutor, which is not always the best deal. With all that being said, he would at least try to some extent and would be able to do something in my defense, as he's generally good at starting players off with, what they need. So he's not great and he's not horrible. He's definitely okay. So I feel like Merchant should go up into the B tier. Moving on, we have the Nurse, where she's a healer who spawns in under the condition that she has a home, the Merchant is present, and the player has at least 100 health minimum. Now, the Nurse would definitely be able to perform and understand more injury-based crimes and situations. She could also be able to better understand more extreme occurrences, such as autopsies for a murder or something along those lines. She definitely has an affinity with loving bad boys, such as the arms dealer. So she would definitely try and, help me cover a crime if I actually did commit it. The Nurse seems like one of those ride or die kind of people. I think she could forge or manipulate medical documentation to my favor, making her decently suited to be representing me in my defense. Of course, she does still have a cost, as she'll not even heal a wounded player for free. With all that being said, I feel like the Nurse seems pretty qualified to be my lawyer. I'm going to move her one above the Merchant. I'm going to place her into the A tier. Now, here comes someone with a explosive personality, the Demolitionist. He'll only spawn if there's a house with the Merchant and the player is holding an explosive. I have a feeling that the Demolitionist would be only suited to handle niche extreme crimes, ones that actually somehow involve explosives, and ones that are too harsh to list on YouTube. Now, otherwise, he would not be of too much great of use for me and may even make my situation, I think, worse. I can very easily see the Demolitionist walking into the courtroom and casually bringing up how he has bombs all inside his pockets as he's speaking to the judge. Maybe even saying a quote that he says "It's a good day to die." Similarly, the Tavernkeep states, "No wonder whoever the name of the Demolitionist has so many accidents. You can't imagine how much ale he buys from me." That's two bad things. He's always drunk and he always has explosives on him. So his fondness for the Tavernkeep is even more concerning, as he could easily show up to the courtroom drunk as a skunk. So I have serious doubts about the Demolitionist defending me in the court in pretty much any regard, especially as I see him more hindering my innocence, more so than helping it, and therefore Demolitionist is going to be the first that I'm going to place all the way at the bottom into the F tier. Up next is the Die Trader, who spawns in with a house, of course, The player is holding a dire ingredient, and at least 4 other NPCs are present. The dye trader seems to have that kind of rich and snobby attitude behind him, as he says stuff such as, "The only kind of wood I would bother dyeing is rich mahogany. Dyeing any other wood is such a waste." I have a feeling that the dye trader would try and pull a fast one on me, where I would pay him like up front, and then I just somehow never see him again. He just runs off with my money. Even if he were to show up, would he have like any qualifications? He could barter decently, but otherwise his judgment may be too clouded by finances more than anything else. So I would trust him more so than the Demolitionist, but otherwise he's pretty low. I'm gonna throw the dye trader into the E tier. Now we have the quest-giving angler, a child who you could find washed ashore. He doesn't sell you anything, nor does he do much outside of fishing, which is pretty concerning. He would obviously be preoccupied with tying fishing knots or watching the Outdoors channel or something before he does anything for you. Would a child have too much insight on law? Maybe, but definitely not this child. Again, I would at least trust him. He'd at least show up to court and maybe attempt something. He wouldn't run off with my money or hinder me in any sort of form or fashion. So the angler is meh. It's better than the previous 2 entrants. I'm going to place the angler into the D tier. Now we have one of the more interesting NPCs. We have the zoologist. She requires an empty house and at least 10% of the bestiary to be filled to spawn in. And of course, she has her unique outwardly appearance, being a human-sized anthropomorphic fox-human hybrid sort of deal going on. If the courtroom would allow her looks, which we're going to give her the benefit of the doubt, again, we always give her the benefit of the doubt, she would be okay at her job. I think there's a few issues, though. So cooping her up in a courtroom all day is the same as caging up your household dog and would just make her, like, restless and too excited to concentrate. Also, we have to hope that my meeting time in the courtroom does not fall under a full moon, or else she would turn into her werefox form. And if she were to defend me, she would just say something like, "Come on, judge, he totes didn't do it," and my face would just like sink into the palms of my hands. I think the zoologist is a pretty huge risk, and therefore I'm gonna place her into the F tier. She would just hinder me more so than do anything good. Now, following up with looks and the dress code violations, we have even more dress code violations, the Dryad. Now, she only spawns in when there's, of course, an available house and any boss from the list have been defeated. She would be able to detect a corrupt court system, at least, if I placed her in that situation, and may be able to, like, somehow manipulate my verdict due to this. You know, maybe she could do some sort of blackmailing or something along those lines. Her clothing situation is what's wrong with choosing her for the courtroom, but maybe, you know, you could just tell her and she could dress up a little more formally. She'd probably not like it, but maybe she'd at least do it. The Dryad would also say that the jury has some, like, negative vibes and throw some sort of questionable powder towards them to make them quote-unquote happy. So I'm between E and F tier, and I'm going to give the Dryad the benefit of the doubt. I think she's a little better, at least, than, like, the zoologist. I'm going to place her into the E tier. Moving on, we now have the painter, a man who cares a great deal about the colors that can be expressed through the brush. He requires an empty house and 8 other NPCs, and simply sells you anything and everything to do with painting. Now, I get, like, major dirty lawyer vibes with this, so he would be able to, like, cover up my crimes and would be able to somehow manipulate investigators to not be able to gather evidence if I were to commit the crime. He gives me major Saul Goodman vibes. Now, he could easily do, like, a landlord special on a crime scene and just literally paint over everything. I think in terms of legalities, the painter would be somewhat lacking. He also seems to lack a little bit of empathy. I feel like he'd at least try pretty well. He would charge me a little bit, the average painter's cost, so he's okay in that regard. I'm going to put the painter in the B tier. Up next, we have a man after my own heart. We have the golfer. He spawns in the underground desert, and speaking to him, quote-unquote, frees him, with legendary names such as Jim Mulligan or Jack Nichollisp. I feel like he's a man who's fixated on one thing. Can you guess what that is? Man, I'll be honest, I think I'm really screwed here. You know anything to get me out of this? He could use his golf skills to gas up the judge, who has, like, a good chance to also enjoy the sport. Maybe they could strike a decent out-of-court deal with the prosecution while they're all playing 18 holes. Now, the chance for that is seemingly low, but at least there's a chance. I feel like I'd be pretty nervous with the golfer as my lawyer, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the golfer into the D tier. Following up the golfer, we have the arms dealer. Now, The arms dealer has excellent charisma, as he's known to woo several female NPCs in Terraria. So he definitely has the ability to try and persuade the jury to give a lighter sentence or fines or whatever. But let's say that the judge or jury doesn't buy into it. Say they're not convinced by arms dealer's honeyed words. How would he react? He would draw whatever firearm he has and point it directly at someone's skull and not even hesitate to pull the trigger. Now, I think that is a huge risk, taking the arms dealer on as my lawyer, but he could still probably very slightly have a chance to represent me as a lawyer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep him out of the F tier and place him into the E tier. Now we find an unconscious man after defeating either the Brain of Cthulhu or the Eater of Worlds. We have the Tavernkeep, an NPC that comes from the Dungeon Defenders 2 crossover. I find the Tavernkeep to be someone who boasts a lot, saying that life's a challenge when you're just naturally better than everyone else. But he also has a sympathetic side to him, being a bartender who thinks that you can just drink away your worries. Now, is his sympathy just to gaslight me into giving him some more gold? Maybe. I find him to be okay to rise up to the podium in my stead, but I don't think he's either the best nor the worst. So I'm going to place the Tavernkeep just directly into the middle. I'm going to place him into the C tier. We now have the Spider Caves damsel in distress. We have the stylist. The stylist really gives off that rumorish hairstylist vibe, always spreading like gossip and rumors at every opportunity. I also have a pretty good feeling that she'd be terrible at keeping any secrets, and therefore like my confidentiality with her would be just in ruins. I would be all alone with her, like discussing our defense case, and tell her something like, honestly, stylist, I did throw out that litter. I am a litter bug, but I'm never going to admit it in court. And then we would appear in court and she would just blurt out, "This reminds me of when that other guy SF confessed that he was a litter bug," just out of nowhere. In all honesty, she might be able to change up my looks and style a bit as to throw off like eyewitnesses or something like that. But then she would somehow manage to just tell them once again that that person is me. I think she would absolutely throw me under the bus at the first opportunity, whether on purpose or by accident. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna throw the stylist into the F tier. Now we have the bound goblin rescued and made into the oh so lovable NPC. We have the Goblin Tinkerer. Now, the Tinkerer would have that mindset that anything and everything could be simplified by the use of an invention. So say he was handed all the information to defend me in a court case. So instead of studying up on the case, the Goblin Tinkerer would try and make me a robot named like the Automaton Attorney 1.0, which would then just blurt out fallacies in the prosecution's statements or something, but like at the most awkward time. He'd be able to help me out to some extent, but I feel like the little old Goblin Tinkerer would somehow mess up something along the way and cause some sort of failures in my defense, you know, that the prosecution would just punch holes through my defense. So he's okay, but again, not the best. I think I'm going to follow him up with the Tavernkeep, and I'm going to place the Goblin Tinkerer into the C tier. Now we have the NPC after the Queen Bee has been defeated. We have the Witch Doctor. He speaks in sort of rhythms and rhymes, which may be able to confuse the judge and jury to help me. Again, on the negative side of that, though, he could confuse the judge and the jury, which in turn could anger them. Now, what if I had a judge like Hank Hill? How would he react after hearing the Witch Doctor's statements?
You're talking like a song from The Lion King. Stop that. It makes no sense.
The Witch Doctor has some interesting clothing choices, which again could anger and confuse. I think he could represent me, but he would just put me in a possibly worse position than I was before entering the courtroom. He would be better suited, at least. I think he could somehow turn some stuff around in my favor. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the Witch Doctor into the D tier. Now we have the old man freed from his curse of Skeletron. We have the clothier, a man who has gone from rags to riches. Now I will lead my argument for clothier with an example. Now let's say that the glove fits me. The clothier is able to easily manipulate those gloves, given we can like steal the gloves from evidence, and make it such that they do not fit me in the slightest. I feel that the clothier would be great for my defense if we play dirty, able to change like my outfits and such, so that I do not match any evidence that the police and detectives find at the scene of the crime. The clothier is not perfect at being my lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel pretty okay with him as my lawyer if we play dirty. For this instance, we're going to place the clothier into the B tier. Now we have another saved person who's found in the dungeon. We have the mechanic, an NPC who was forced by the cultists to build the mechanical bosses in hard mode. Her aptitude would make her pretty intellectually capable of defending me in court, probably being able to cite codes and laws from memory if she studied up on it. She'd also have her general sense of guilt from constructing the mechanical bosses, making her want to do right and defend me in court to the best of her ability. Therefore, I don't think she would charge me too much, if anything. The only concern is that she's able to be easily intimidated and manipulated by the prosecution, seeing as she built those mechanical beasts because she was threatened by the cultists. So she doesn't quite make it to the S tier due to her lack of emotional stability, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw her into the A tier. Now, where's the party at? It's at your place, with at least 8 other NPCs. Yes, it is the party girl. Would she defend me in court? No, she's too busy pre-gaming. Would she be there after I hear my sentence, which is the worst sentence I could receive? No, she's too busy partying at the reception. What would she even say in my defense towards the judge? Were you even there, Your Honor? Party girl is one of the worst lawyer candidates on this list, so of course she's gonna go automatically into the F tier. Up next, we now have the hard mode NPCs, which is, of course, after you beat the wall of flesh. So here we're going to have the first hard mode NPC. We have the wizard himself. Now, I think he has one of the best get out of jail free cards, as he's a wizard. So he could just use a spell to do a multitude of things, like levitate some evidence into a fireplace, or perhaps confuse and disorient the witnesses. Or maybe he could even just cast an amnesia spell to make anyone involved in my case, maybe even me, just forget all about it. I feel like I have no issue at all giving the wizard the highest rank of S tier. Following up the wizard, we have a man who is a video game incarnation of Ebenezer Scrooge. We have the tax collector. We know Scrooge is like cruel and unforgiving, but that's the kind of lawyer I would want. He may lack sympathy, but he makes up for it in like cold hard facts. He'd be like cool and precise and could easily just bail me out with his almost limitless income he receives taxes. Would people look down on me for choosing the old tax collector? Yes. Would I get out of that courtroom with a smile from cheek to cheek? Most likely. I think the tax collector, again, lacking sympathy, keeps him from the S tier, but I'm going to go ahead and throw him into the A tier. Up next is the legendary walking mushroom creature thing. We have the truffle. Would the courtroom allow a giant mushroom in a suit inside? Y'all know we're about giving the benefit of the doubt on this channel, so we will allow that big ol' shroom to represent me. Now, I think he would write me a heartfelt testimonial for the judge and jury to hear that would cause them to tear up, but they would immediately just like throw that out the window once they realize who wrote it, aka a giant mushroom. The truffle would also just spray some sort of mutant spores everywhere while we're just in the courtroom, and attempt to grow some more of its children in the dark since they reproduce by budding. The truffle isn't the best one, and it's also not the worst. It's better-ish, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw the truffle into the B tier. Now we have one who has sailed the 7 seas and is now sailing in to try and make things pretty darn bad for me. We have the pirate who spawns in after at least one pirate invasion has been defeated. Is there anything a stereotypical pirate could do for my case? He may be able to parlay with the courtroom, but otherwise, I think I'm pretty much going to get a worst case scenario with the pirate as my lawyer. Now, maybe he could at least do something to get me out after I've been sent to jail, you know, do some sort of jailbreak, but it'll be like a Jack Sparrow kind of thing where he just bust me out of prison after my sentencing. He wouldn't protect me in the courtroom. So if that is the case, the pirate can at least do something to get me out of jail once I'm in. So he isn't all the way at the bottom in the F tier. Depending on the jail security, I think he'd have a semi-decent chance to bust me out. So at least give him a little bit of a break, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw the pirate into the D tier. Following up the pirate, we have the steampunker, a lady who comes in once we have defeated at least one mechanical boss. Now, I think she would scoff at the idea of going to a courtroom where all the like lights above her run off of electricity, as well as the computer that the person writing down the minutes uses when the steampunker says something like, "Electricity, don't be ludicrous. Nothing beats the power of steam." Her speech would definitely throw off the general audience as she says words like ragamuffin or Jiminy Fluffer. I'd put my case in her hands over the pirate at least, because she is at least innovative and could use her intelligent mind to help me out to some degree. She's not great, she's not horrible. I'm going to go ahead and throw the steampunker into the C tier. Adjacent to the steampunker, we have the cyborg, spawning in once Plantera has been defeated. I feel like the cyborg definitely has some useful functions, such as recording audio or video that could be submitted as evidence. Now, as a man-machine hybrid devoted to science, he could try and use that science to keep me the heck out of the jail cell. He would definitely be lacking sympathy for me and may not have the emotional capacity to understand the difficulties I go through when I am in the courtroom. But as long as his task is to ensure that I'm found innocent, I think he'd do a pretty good job. Overall, I think I'd throw the cyborg into the A tier, keeping him from the S tier due to his lack of sympathy and looks that may not be appropriate for the courtroom. So, as stated, I'm going to go ahead and throw the cyborg into the A tier. Next up, we have old Jolly Saint Nick, Santa Claus himself. Now, are you telling me he doesn't keep track of who is naughty or nice? He would instantly know if I did the crime and would probably just scold me and leave me a lump of coal if I actually do it. Now, if I were innocent, however, he might pull out the naughty or nice list in a big feather pen and begin to scribble some of the jurors or judges' name towards the naughty list for attempting to wrongly convict me. I feel like they would be tearing up just looking at that sort of sight. So, Santa would be good for cases in which I'm innocent and not good for cases in which I'm guilty and am trying to get out of it, or at least lighten my punishment. But I have a pretty good feeling about the big old jolly fella, so therefore I'm going to throw Santa into the A tier. So lastly, on the hard mode NPCs, we have the princess, who spawns in when all other NPCs have already moved in. She sees the good in all people, including her client, aka me. Now, we know that a princess is capable and has learned all laws and legislations, and therefore is a prime candidate to be my lawyer. She has the looks down, she has the sympathy, she would cost almost nothing since she already has riches and would do it out of the goodness of her heart. Even if we did lose the case and I was found guilty, she could simply use her royalty and either get the judge fired, or even worse, or simply just pardon me of my crimes. She would simply be a goddess of a lawyer for me, and therefore I have no issues throwing the princess into the S tier. So up next we have the other merchants who are just non-permanent residents of our village or town or whatever you want to call it. So starting things off, we have the traveling merchant. Now, I feel even less comfortable using the traveling merchant in comparison to the normal merchant, as at least I could find the regular merchant quite easily in comparison. I think I'd pay an initial fee to the traveling merchant and he would just skip town as soon as he received it. You know, it's nighttime and where does he go? I don't know. He runs off. On a more positive note though, I do think he has seen just about everything and can at least provide some sort of insight on pretty much any situation I get into. I think I could at least attempt to make him my lawyer, and he is better suited than a few other NPCs on this list. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to throw the traveling merchant into the D tier. So now we have the clothier while he's cursed with his master Skeletron. We have the old man, a guy who has definitely seen better days, and all he wants to do is free himself from Skeletron. He reminds me of Emperor Palpatine, always just wanting to be strike down or something. And I think he has little to no care about my legal situations. So he would just ask me to free him at all times from this curse, and I don't think he's going to do anything beyond that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw the old man into the F. Lastly, on the other NPCs list, we have the skeleton merchant, who is just a simple skeleton out to make a little money during these troubling times. Now, he is kind in comparison to other skeletons, and of course comes with his own skeleton jokes and puns that he likes to say pretty much all the time. I think he's at least willing to try and help me, given, you know, financial compensation to him, and would do an okay job. The judge and jury may question a skeleton in the courtroom, but they also have already seen a human fox hybrid and Santa Claus, so I think they may be a little bit accustomed to that. The skeleton merchant seems to be the best suited of the other NPCs, so I'm going to go ahead and throw him into the C tier. So last up on this tier list, we have the town slimes. So I'm going to critique them mainly on just looks and names alone, since they all speak slimy gibberish that us common folk can't understand. Maybe the judge and jury can have like a slime translator and can get through to them somehow. They'll be placed into the tier list, but in their own kind of subcategory, where if I was forced to choose a town slime as my lawyer. But anyways, let's go in and we're going to quickly rate the town slimes. First up, we have the nerdy slime. So the nerd has some form of knowledge and laws, so I can use that to my advantage. He's going to go into the A tier. Now we have the cool slime, where he's too cool for the courtroom, and therefore too cool to be my defense. He's going into the F tier. Now we have the elder slime, where the old elder slime probably has some wisdom he gained over the years, so he wouldn't be too bad. We're going to go ahead and throw the elder slime into the B tier. Now we have the clumsy slime, where I feel like the clumsy slime would try pretty hard to be a good lawyer, but would somehow fall on the evidence and bring it into the courtroom, which could be good or bad for me, depending on my situation. I'm going to go ahead and throw the slime into the C tier. Up next, we have the Diva Slime, where maybe the Diva Slime could somehow make the courtroom act on purely emotion, which again could be a good or bad thing for me, probably a bad thing. I think that would otherwise be pretty bad for me in terms of money or stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the Diva Slime, not all the way in the F tier. We're going to put Diva Slime into the E tier. Up next, we have the Surly Slime, where the Surly Slime definitely has some sort of connections with the mob. So if anything were to go wrong with my case, the Surly Slime would get angry and slowly just pop or jump towards the witness stand or prosecution or judge and try and beat them up. But at least the mob connections are there, so they can use some sort of intimidation factor. The Surly Slime is going to go into the D tier. Up next, we have the Mystic Slime, where I feel like it's going to be the exact same situation as the Wizard, where the Mystic Slime could use their mystic abilities to cast some sort of cool spell that incorporates the word slime into it, like Super Slime Memory Skip or something. I don't know, I'm not a cool wizard like they are, but they're gonna make it all the way to the S tier. And last up on the slime list, we have a slime that's bound by honor and therefore knows the laws. Well, just like the Nerd Slime, we have the Squire Slime. The only issue is bringing in the sword they possess, and for some reason, I do not think they will give up that sword easily. I would trust the Nerdy Slime just a little bit more than the Squire Slime, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the Squire Slime into the B tier. And there is another completed tier list, folks. All Terraria NPCs ranked on how well I think they would represent me as my defense in a court of law. Now, I think this will alter the Terraria landscape forever as we know it. Now, if you enjoyed the tier list, I'm going to be the stereotypical YouTuber once again, and I will ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. And until the next video, people, adios.